I'm really excited about this group tonight because I feel like we're getting a real treat. We've got all of these award finalists and winners, ranging across genres. They interact with multiple art forms, and they're reading from prose, criticism, nonfiction, memoir, and fiction. We've got Lynne Tillman tonight, who has been interviewed by everyone from Lydia Davis to Jeffrey O'Brien, who are themselves, venerable and honorable writers. She's been part of the downtown art scene and the state-of-the-art Red Lemonade publishing scene as well, so she bridges a lot. Her 4 novels are newly published by Red Lemonade this year, as is her new short story collection. One of the things I'd like to say that interests me about Lynne is that she is a person who has continued to change how her writing is, and I think that she speaks to any moment. I mean, I can look back at the work that she's done over the years, and it always feels like something that has an energy to it that keeps it alive. Just for the record, she's the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a novelist, short story writer, and cultural critic. Her novels include Haunted Houses, Motion Sickness, and No Lease on Life, which is a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in Fiction, and was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year. She's published 3 nonfiction books, including an essay collection, The Broad Picture, as well as 4 story collections, including Absence Makes the Heart, and most recently, Someday This Will Be Funny. She's currently writing a column for Frieze magazine. Recently, EBR published a casebook on her most recent novel, American Genius, a comedy. And Someday This Will Be Funny. Her new story collection is, as I mentioned, from Red Lemonade, which is a new publishing imprint of Richard Nash, who was the founder of Soft Skull, which published her first novel, her most recent novel, American Genius. Lynne's going to be reading from fiction for us tonight, I believe from No Lease on Life. Is that correct? Right. And just to make things interesting, everyone's going to read a little bit, and then I'm going to ask them some questions. Okay. Thank you. Lynne.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I thought I would read from No Lease on Life because it is my most dedicated New York City book. And those of us who live in New York City know that the superintendent of the building you live in is an extremely important character. And I brought him into my book. Also, this novel is interrupted by jokes that I think represent also something about the city. So I'll start with a joke. A man goes to hell and the devil says, I usually don't do this, but I'll give you your choice of room for eternity. So he takes the man to the first room. All the people are ankle deep in shit. In the second room, all the people are knee deep in shit. In the third room, all the people are waist deep in shit and they're drinking coffee. The man says, I guess I'll take the third room. The devil says, okay. Then he turns to the people in the third room and yells, coffee break's over, back on your heads. Elizabeth knew the halls could be maintained, even in her degraded neighborhood. It couldn't be accomplished if the super, whose job was to clean and maintain the building, was a pathological junk collector. Hector was incapable of throwing anything out. He was attached to garbage. He was like a vampire running a blood bank or a pyromaniac firefighter. The firefighter goes rushing to a fire. He knows what his job is, to put out the fire, but he's on the fire-red engine where he's wanted to be ever since his mouth was snatched away from his mother's breast, and now he's racing to a fire. He's along for the ride, for the thrill of it, and once he's there, he doesn't want to extinguish the fire. The flames shoot up around him. They engulf him like a large woman. He's swallowed up and warm. But he looks around and he sees his buddies in danger, and they see him. He's hanging back, or worse, he's feeding the flames. So he has to pretend to fight the fire he loves. If there aren't enough fires, he sets them. He's unfit for his job. Hector the Super. Saul Lockler was Chief Justice of New York State. He stalked and threatened a woman who'd rejected him. You'd think that a judge who jails people for committing stupid venal acts, who get caught by making asinine mistakes, would not make them himself. He can't stop himself, can't help himself. He's possessed, obsessed. Wapla threatens her, her name is Joy, over his car phone. Traceable, stupid. Hector, the super. There was a Mets catcher, Mackie Sasser. He had to quit playing. He developed a block against throwing the ball back to the pitcher on the mound. He couldn't throw it. He could throw the ball over the pitcher's head to the second baseman, but not to the pitcher. The Mets put him in the outfield for a while. It wasn't his position. His position was behind the batter, squatting. But he was neurotic, blocked. His time in baseball was over. Hector the super was blocked. He couldn't do the job he was paid to do. Hector's apartment was incomprehensible. He, his wife, their grown children and their kids, and an old dog lived in it. It was like the halls and stairs, but it was also cluttered with old newspapers, boxes, broken knickknacks, unrepairable lamps, and bottles for recycling that were never recycled, only stored. The overwrought apartment was stacked with unusable junk from the street. Sometimes, when Elizabeth happened to be walking downstairs or upstairs, and Hector or his wife happened to open their door a crack, she spied a narrow pathway between piles of boxes. She saw years of accumulation, things hanging from the ceiling and everything thrown together, piled up, even several broken down wooden dresses stacked on top of each other that reached to the ceiling. She couldn't take it in. The halls and marble stairs in a turn-of-the-century building built for immigrant labor could be kept tidy, even though the building stood shabby and tired in a mongrel neighborhood. It couldn't if the super's attitude toward his own apartment challenged and expanded the limits of what was fit for human habitation. His apartment exceeded standards. It was a mental condition, an excessive response to the burden of the physical world on the mental one. There didn't seem to be a table or chairs. There didn't seem to be chairs to sit on or beds, but she couldn't see that far back into the long apartment. They probably ordered out. She and Roy ordered takeout from Chinese, Thai, and Italian restaurants. On another night, Elizabeth was walking along the street. A foreigner approached her. "Please, could you ask me," he said, "tell you, what means no menus?" Buildings have no menu signs, and their windows are on their front doors. Thousands of menus for takeout restaurants are thrown into vestibules. It's the super's job to get rid of them. Hector never did. He didn't even save them. Elizabeth picked them up and threw them out. The landlord said it wouldn't pay to put a notice in the window saying no menus because restaurants ignored them. No menus means the tenants of the building don't want restaurants to advertise their menus for takeout food. Takeout food? Takeout food is food you order over the phone from a restaurant. The restaurant delivers it to your apartment. Delivers? They send a boy or a man on a bicycle usually. He carries the food you ordered. Why takeout? So you don't have to cook, so that you don't have to go out to eat. You can eat in. Eat in your apartment. It's short for eat in your apartment. No menus, thank you, he said. You're welcome, Elizabeth said. He turned away. He appeared confused. He looked at the sign on the door again. No menus. He was apartment hunting. He turned her way again. He pointed to the sign, and after an exaggerated sigh of relief, mimed for her benefit, he smiled poignantly. He waved goodbye. I think that's enough. Thank you.
Everyone recognize those moments? Can you hear me? And this is a different mic. Can you hear me? You know those moments? Those New York moments? And did anyone who came from elsewhere not know what take out and take in, eat in meant? I mean, it's really right there on the edge. Can you take us back to that sleepless night of No Lease on Life, that novel that you put together that goes so deeply into the life moments of the East Village, and tell us what inspired that? What were the kind of did you have sleepless New York nights?
Not really. Not sleepless like hers, no. But everything, was sort of exaggerated for effect. Two things. One, I'd been thinking about James Joyce's Ulysses and doing a kind of postmodern version of it. So 24 hours in the city, there's even a visit to the post office and so on. But in No Lease on Life, the man is mostly in bed, lying in bed. My Molly, was lying in bed. Roy, his name. And then I was fishing around for another book to write, and a friend of mine, another writer, Cynthia Carr, I think she did get an NBCC for a book called Our Town, a wonderful nonfiction book. I say, I just don't know what I should write next. And she said, well, why don't you come home? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, your last 2 novels were set in Europe. I said, okay. And then I thought, then I could join these interests. Put them together.
When you're researching a book that's set so specifically in a place like New York and in a neighborhood with Hector and all the people, how do you go about taking notes and sort of gathering the text as you work?
Well, it's interesting because the neighborhood we live in, the block that we're on, we think we know it. And yet if you try to say, well, what is the laundromat next to the pizza shop, which is next to the... So I went around with a tape recorder and I recorded from one store to the next. And on First Avenue, there's this, and this. And then I went on to other blocks. And so that I had it written down what was there. I also, there were people in my neighborhood whom I said hello to all the time, but we had never talked. These were just really basically strangers, but kind of friendly strangers. And I asked if I could interview them. And so I interviewed 3 people, and I put those in the book as conversations. It's a very compressed 24 hours in this book, and that's in part, what you can do with fiction. That's so much better than life. But so I did do that kind of research, and if you read the book, you'll know, or maybe not know, because it's not written retrospectively. I said it on June 17th, 1994. Now, June 16th was Bloomsday, and June 17th, 1994 happened to be the day of the night of O.J.'s Bronco ride. So I have my character watching the Knicks game, and seeing, as all of us who were watching the Knicks game did, suddenly that little insert of the white Bronco being driven by Al Collins. And it was the most phenomenal thing, but because I was writing this not retrospectively, I had to write it for that moment. So there's no extrapolating about OJ, it's just part of the night. And it's a strange part of the night, but it goes on, and her life goes on. But that was, one day, that was my, modernism has lasted one day, from June 16th to June 17th.
Or like with Hector and Saul Walker, which in that case was quite of the moment. I read the Saul Walker case. I want to look here for a moment at your bio on Amazon.
Oh.
Because it's really kind of intriguing. I will quote, here's an author's bio. It could be written differently. I've written many for myself and read lots of other people. None is right or sufficient, each slants one way or the other, so a kind of fiction, a selection of events and facts. So let me say I wanted to be a writer since I was 8 years old, that I actually do write stories and novels and essays, and that they get published still astonishes me. But what interests me is that your bio kind of defines how you go about, in a way, your work. You're saying it's a fiction, a selection of events and facts. And then at the end of this bio, you should go to Amazon and read it. It's really wonderful. I don't want to take up too much more time. But you describe writing in a gorgeous way. When I work inside the world in which I do make choices, I'm completely absorbed in what happens and what can emerge. Writing is a beautiful, difficult relationship with what you know and don't know, have or haven't experienced, with grammar and syntax, with words primarily with ideas, and with everything else that's been written. And personally, I think that's a gorgeous explanation of what writing is.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering, when you look at your work, is there a point where you began to understand that's how you do it? Because I think each writer has a distinct voice, and yours has that wonderful idea, the idea of being inside the thinking of a character, those interior monologues that are really rich in detail, but also inhabited within a body, as well as the external, so you're mixing all of that up. Was there a point when you began to do that, or was it always the way you thought?
I think as I've gone along, I've understood better what I'm doing. I continue to feel great mystery around it also, especially the compulsion to continue doing it. And that I want to and have a need to, and I think I'm very fortunate in a lot of ways that I actually did it and have been published. So it is a fantasy. It was a fantasy, and it did come true. So that's sort of amazing to me. But I realized that not so long ago, that it was very important for me to figure out a way for the reader to experience what it was that I was writing. Mm-hmm. That it kind of not stay on the page so much. And that's a hard thing to do, but that's what that's what impresses me most in writing. I mean, it impresses in the sense that it really leaves an impression.
I want to ask a little bit about rhythm and about your relationships, and what rhythm means in your fiction. And I'm going to begin by reading. Maybe you should read this. Do you want to?
Okay.
Okay. Just a couple of bold-faced underlined. This
Okay.
is from a story of the new collection. The rhythms.
This is called The Substitute. She watched his heart have a small fit under his black t-shirt. Its unsteady rhythm was a bridge between them. Lost in the possibilities he offered her, she studied his thin face, aquiline nose, tobacco yellow fingers. In the moment which swallowed her whole, she admired his need to smoke. She wouldn't always, but not being able to stop meant something now. Certain damage was sexy, a few sinuous scars. He'd be willing, eager maybe, to exist with her in the margins. She'd set the terms, ride, nurse on danger, take acceptable or necessary risks. Maybe there'd be one night at a luscious border where they'd thrum on thrill, ecstatically unsure, or one long day into one long night when they'd say everything and nothing and basely have their way with each other. She wasn't primitive, but had an idea of it, to live for and in her senses. She'd tell him this. Then they'd vanish, disappear without regret. She was astonished at how adolescence malingered in every cell of her mature body.
Can you tell about rhythm? You hear the rhythm to me? It's just got such a flow to it.
I was once asked what influenced me most in writing, and I said listening to Ray Charles when I was a kid. And rhythms have always been important, but if that early stuff I listened to when I was 7 or 8, my sister's records, and like What I'd Say, and the emphasis, the way in which the language, the meaning, and the rhythm are all tied up together. And because I'm not what's called a plot-driven writer, rhythms are often what carry the day for my writing. They keep it moving along. There's a dynamic in that. And also, I've been very influenced by different poets. I used to go to hear a lot of poetry, and I still do. And the idea of breath, that you can't have just a long sentence forever. Even American Genius, a comedy, my last novel, where I stretched that limit far, I would have some short sentences, like 3-word sentences, just because I thought, well, the reader has to breathe. There's got to be a moment. There's,
take your eye off the page.
Take the eye off the page, yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, is always fascinated me about your work, is your connection with, like Frank O'Hara and Frederick Putnam. You've had had this connection with visual artists that has included writing about them, being friends with Kiki Smith and Barbara Kruger and others, writing cultural criticism, and writing stories in which they appear, and writing about Madame Realism, developing what now might be one of those avatars one would have online. You were way ahead of your time with that, So I'm wondering if you could, are you still deeply influenced by, and what has been the influence of collaborating with visual artists on your work?
It's always hard, and again, this is that sort of fiction that one can make up, but I was one of those television babies. We had a television in the house from when I was 3 years old, and I think visual things were extremely important to me. I would read and look at the TV, read and look at the TV. And my mother was wild for movies, and I saw a lot of them as a kid too, and went to museums. And I just think that that art, visual material, was extremely important to me. Also because I realized that something else goes on in your brain when you look at a photograph or a painting or a film, that your eye is working differently, your mind is working differently. And then I did some painting when I was at Hunter College. I was an English major and a history minor, but I took all my electives in studio art, and actually painting, doing that work and being serious about it, even though I was a real oddball in the art department because I didn't know anything. That really stretched my imagination, I would say. It's very different figuring out that kind of space compared with the space of the white page. And it's meant a lot to me.
And over the years, when you've done collaborations where you'll have a story that has an image that goes with it, how does that work?
Well, often over the years,
what comes first?
it's usually the art comes first, and an artist will say, will you do something for my catalog? And way back in the mid-'80s, 86 it was, I said that I would never write just art criticism. I mean, the never has been some, but that I didn't want to foreground the art and forsake the writing, that the writing would be as important. So I said, well, I'll write a story. And people let me do it. And I just started doing it, and I had this character, Madame Realism. Sometimes I used her. Now I've got a new character, the translation artist. And so it usually started like that. And in the case with the first thing I did with Kiki Smith, the book, the first Madame Realism, I gave her the story and she did drawings to it.
I think that's one of the things that is sort of the best thing to learn as you're studying in an MFA program, is you learn the rules, and then you break the rules to become who you are as a writer. I mean, I think you're that alone is saying, I don't want to have to do it the other way. I want it my own way, and that's a strong
I sort of had nothing to lose.
Yeah. You're teaching at the new school here, but you're also teaching in Albany. And I got to wondering, are you a different person in Albany than you are in New York City?
I don't see it very much at the city. I see this big university there. And the hallways, it was built in the 60s, so it was built for crowd control. And they've got low ceilings and fairly narrow hallways. And the kids that I teach, most of the undergraduates, are much less well-read than, or much less well aware of things that are happening in the city that city kids would know about. It's not that all undergraduates here know everything. I don't mean that at all, but there's you'll come to the city, want to connect with a lot of different things. And I had one student at Albany who wasn't interested in any story that I remember. It was just no story I gave him was he interested, that I gave the class. And I finally said to him, well, what are you interested in? He said, soccer. And I said, do you play? And he said, no. I said, so for the rest of your life, you're going to watch soccer? I said, I think you need more than that. But I just think that people living here think they should be interesting, and they should be interested, and it's not unusual for people to go to a lot of things and do a lot of things.
Last question. What are you reading now?
I just finished reading a book called Dion Arbus, A Chronology, 1923 to 1971, put out by Aperture. And it's from her diaries and letters and work notes. And it's extremely, she was an amazing writer. I mean, if she hadn't been a photographer, she definitely could have been a great writer. She's an amazing writer. And it's beautiful and interesting. Anybody who's interested in photography or in writing, or her thoughts, her ability to say what she wants to say about what she's doing. And her work is so complex around what she's representing. And she was there, she knew it. She understood what that treacherous ground she was on was. So that's what I just finished reading.
All right.
Thank you so much.